Hello everyone. Today we are going to be talking about circadian rhythms. Before I get started, just to let you know, I've got my camera up here for Facebook, my camera down here for Instagram, so I'm going to try to make eye contact with all of you all and check comments in both places, but my main focus will be on Facebook since these are recorded. Okay, excuse me. So let's take a moment to reflect back on when your child was a newborn. Those first few weeks, you probably spent your time trying to connect with your newborn, learn all the ins and outs, figure out how to change a diaper with those tiny legs that are so strong and for some reason it just won't stay out, how to use a swaddle, and all while doing that, figuring out how to take care of yourself. And possibly some older children that you already had. Your child was sleeping at first, sleeping well. Maybe it was difficult to actually wake your child. And then around, that 3-month mark or 4-month mark, bam, all of a sudden, your child that would sleep in maybe until 7 or 8 a.m., sometimes even 9 a.m., all of a sudden is waking at like 6 or 7 in the morning, maybe even before 6. Well, I hope that today, during today's live, when I talk about circadian rhythms and when that develops, and all the different things that goes into it, that you then understand why your child's schedule may have shifted. Before I start to do that, let me introduce myself in case we have anyone new here. My name is Megan Robert. I am owner of After the Stork. I'm a child sleep consultant, a postpartum doula, and a former nanny. And my main job is to help families like yours be well rested, whether that's to be proactive or if you are struggling. I help, to educate you, to empower you as a parent so that you understand what's going on with your child. I create customized sleep plans for you to implement, and then I support you as you implement your sleep plan so that you can implement it correctly. For more details on how I can support you, you can go to afterthestorksleep.com/what is entailed. Just a quick reminder, I am not a medical professional. I help families from a behavioral perspective. So these videos that I provide, they are educational and informational purposes only, meant to promote the general understanding of child sleep for you as a parent or for you if you are someone who works with younger children. The information contained within these videos and any resources that I provide are for your educational purposes only. They are not intended as and should not be understood or construed as medical advice or substitute for medical advice. So if you have any medical issues or concerns, please speak to your pediatrician or another healthcare provider. If your child snores or mouth breathes, check with your pediatrician. Tell your pediatrician that this is happening. It might not be anything, but it is a symptom occasionally of sleep apnea or other underlying medical issues that will prevent your child from sleeping well. You can reach out to a pediatrician, an ENT, or a sleep specialist if you find that this is happening. All right, so let's jump in. So this week's, over the past weeks, this segment of Lives is all about understanding sleep to help you better understand your child. And over the past couple weeks, I've talked about sleep cycles, we've talked about non-REM sleep, we've talked about REM sleep. And now we're going to jump into the 2 different systems that affect your sleep, that contribute to your sleep. One of those systems is called the internal timing system. This is what you will refer to as the circadian rhythms, a biological clock, an internal clock. Another way that we refer to this is as wake drive. The second system that drives sleep is the homeostatic control mechanism. This is what we refer to as sleep pressure or sleep drive. So today, we are going to touch on circadian rhythm. Next week, we will touch on sleep drive, and then after we've talked about both of them, it will help you understand how they affect one another, and most importantly, why having a schedule for your child is so important in order to have good sleep. Let me try to move this down for a moment. Sorry, Facebook. Okay. Now, before we begin, just to let you guys know, I am gathering all of this information from so many different books that I have read, that I have learned from. We've got this one that you've heard me talk about a million times, Healthy Sleep Habits, Happy Child by Dr. Marc Weissbluth. I am also using Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. This is an interesting book to read, regardless if your child is struggling or not. If you like science-based, evidence-based information, but with some fun facts, this is an awesome book. And then another one is Solving Your Child's Sleep Problems by Richard Ferber. So I focused on the areas of science, sleep. So today, circadian rhythms. Before we begin to figure out, we're going to discuss what circadian rhythms are, why different ways that they fluctuate, how they contribute, how they develop over your child's lifetime, and the different systems that they contribute to. So circadian rhythms, they are biological cycles that occur every 24 hours. This involves physical, mental, and behavioral changes. So things like your sleep, things like the different organs throughout your system, your intestinal system, your your moods and emotions throughout the day. Circadian rhythms contribute to your core body temperature. You've got a core body temperature rhythm, to your appetite, your moods and emotions, your metabolic rate, releases of certain hormones, and obviously those sleep-wake patterns that we are really going to focus on today. How are these circadian rhythms contributing to your child's sleep and your own sleep? Now, there are a few different types of circadian rhythms that develop early in life that contribute to sleep. One is just the sleep-wake rhythm. This is the pattern of going from being in an awake state to an asleep state, to an awake state to an asleep state. So this happens immediately with birth. So your child is born, they're in an awake state, and then they transition into the sleep state, back and forth. However, this is a biological rhythm, but it is not quite regulated by an internal clock. That will develop over time. The second circadian rhythm that contributes to sleep is body temperature rhythm. We typically will fall asleep as our body temperature starts to fall, and it is at its daily minimum. And then we start to wake as our temperature starts to rise. It is very difficult to fall asleep if we are falling asleep at a time when our temperature is rising. It is around 6 weeks that babies start to regulate their temperature to where it contributes to their sleep. But at first, we notice this is only happening at nighttime. So right before a baby goes to sleep for bed, temperature is going to be high, and then as the baby starts to sleep, it starts to dip. And this is when we start to see night sleep organization. Then around 12 to 16 weeks, temperature rhythms become more consistent. 12 to 16 weeks, 3 to 4 months. This is also when we start to see day sleep becoming more organized. So you see this pattern as we start to see these body temperatures being regulated and having more of a daily rhythm, we then start to see sleep affected by this. Excuse me. Around 3 to 6 months, cortisol production rhythm occurs, and this means that cortisol, the hormone cortisol, starts to be pumped out regularly throughout a 24-hour cycle. This will peak early in the morning, and then it dips to its lowest at around midnight. The second, or the fourth circadian rhythm that contributes to sleep, but it's similar to the cortisol, is melatonin production rhythm. So melatonin, although when a baby is born, melatonin is very high, and if you're not familiar, melatonin is this hormone that relaxes your muscles and is kind of like, imagine that you're running a race and you've got someone who's got the gun that shoots the gun to tell the race to start. That's what melatonin does for sleep. Melatonin does not drive sleep, but melatonin is the hormone that signals to the other parts of the brain that generate sleep that it is time to start. And so when a newborn is born, they have melatonin. However, this is from the mother. And so for about the first week, a child is driven with that melatonin to sleep. They sleep a lot during that first week. However, that will disappear. And then it starts to be secreted by the individual infant around 6 weeks. again, this is the time when we start to see that night sleep occurring. It isn't until 12 to 16 weeks, though, that melatonin is heavily surged at night. So although melatonin starts to secrete around 6 weeks, it's a very low level that is secreted. So there's this portion of the brain that's developed to help regulate circadian rhythms. It's called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. So the suprachiasmatic nucleus is what will send out these hormones to the body, send out these hormones to different areas of the brain, and it is melatonin that it will secrete in order to tell the rest of the body that it is time to sleep. This is also the area that regulates all those other different circadian rhythms that I talked about. Now, another rhythm that contributes to sleep is the alert versus drowsy rhythm. So I'm going to show you a graph here. This is often what we think of when we are referring to the circadian rhythm and sleep. So I've got a couple charts. So throughout the day, your circadian rhythm for your alertness and drowsiness state is going to rise and fall. So it's going to rise, you're going to be more alert. It's going to dip, you're going to be drowsy. Rise, you're more alert. It's going to dip, you're more drowsy. So for you as an adult, what happens is when you wake up, your circadian rhythm is starting to rise. It's reaching a higher point. However, midday, maybe around 2 or 3 p.m., you feel this, you're super drowsy. You're in a super drowsy state. It's very hard to focus. Maybe it's right after lunch. Well, this is natural because your circadian rhythm for alertness versus drowsiness is dipping to an all-time low for the day. This is the same that happens throughout the night. So the daytime and nighttime will mirror one another. So you're going to wake, and then you're going to have a time when your circadian rhythm dips and you are super drowsy and it's very hard to be alert, to focus. It's biologically driven. However, then once that passes, you will start to feel more awake and more alert again as that moment passes. Now, if you were to allow yourself, you would be able to take a nap at this time. This is also a time when children who are on a 1-nap schedule will sleep best. If we miss this dip, it is much harder to fall asleep. So I was about to show you these graphs. So here is one graph that shows what it is like for alertness to sleep. So we're going to look at this middle one. So I don't know if this is backwards for you guys. So we wake up in the morning and our circadian rhythm is high. We're very alert. And then it goes down. It dips a little bit. And then it comes back up, dips. You'll see that it dips around. Wait, am I looking at the wrong one? I'm sorry, I'm looking at the wrong one. Okay, so when we wake up, it starts to rise, and then we'll have a little bitty dip in the middle of the day. And this is the midday dip that I was talking about when you're going to feel tired. It is during this time that if you allowed yourself, you could take a nap. And then it is going to rise, and there will be a time that is called the forbidden sleep zone. This is a time when you might experience your child being in that wired state. This is a time that it is very difficult to fall asleep because our circadian rhythm is at an all-time high. But then our circadian rhythm will start to dip, and this is going to be the time when it's easier to fall asleep. Now, the number of times that throughout a 24-hour cycle that the circadian rhythm cycles through will depend on the individual's age and development. So for us, those dips only happen a couple times within a 24-hour period. However, for an infant that's taking several naps, their dip is good. They're going to go up, and then they will dip, and they'll go up, and they will dip. And these dips happen around 9 a.m. and somewhere between 12 and 1 p.m. This is why having your child napping at the right time of day is so important. We want our children sleeping when their circadian rhythm is dipping, because that is when they are going to get the best sleep, and it's going to be much easier for them to fall asleep. Now, our circadian rhythm is circadian rhythms. So just to be clear, because this was something that was new for me when I had learned about all this, circadian rhythm is not one thing. Our body has several circadian rhythms. The circadian rhythm of regulating body temperature throughout the day. The circadian rhythm of regulating our alert versus being a sleep state. So all of our circadian rhythms, they are influenced by several different things. But before we talk about that, it's important to note that a circadian rhythm for an individual usually lasts a little bit over an hour. So although we have a 24-hour day, if we were to naturally let ourselves cycle through, let's say we took light out of the picture, our circadian rhythm would last a little bit over 24 hours. However, there are influences externally that help regulate our circadian rhythm. Sunlight is one of the strongest influencers. So when we wake up in the morning, the moment that we see light, that we see sunlight, our circadian rhythm is reset. It's as if we are wearing a watch and our watch is just a little bit slow. So every morning we have to hit the reset button in order to get the clock back at that correct time. The same is happening for us when we see sunlight. Now, sunlight is not the only thing, though, that can help build a strong circadian rhythm. And this is where it's really beneficial for you with your children, because you can help influence your children in order to sleep really well and have really good naps and sleep at night. But we've got to have certain things in place. So one thing is just using light and darkness to your advantage. So darkness helps with the production of melatonin, and light helps with stopping the production of melatonin. And so when you use light to wake your child in the morning and you dim the lights when it's getting closer to bedtime, you then help your child's circadian rhythm stay on track and kind of start relaxing so that they can get into that mode of needing to go to sleep or needing to be awake. This is also something to take into consideration if you have a child who rises early in the morning or has a difficult time falling asleep at night. If your child is rising early in the morning, is the room as dark as it could be? This is often such an easy fix. Is light coming through literally just the edges of the curtains? If any light is getting through, it is going to make it more difficult for your child to stay asleep in the early morning. Same at nighttime. If your child is being exposed to a screen or bright lights before bed, it is telling your child's brain that it's time to still be awake. It's time to still be in an alert state, and so it is much more difficult for them to fall asleep. Other things that are external that can contribute to your child's sleep and the circadian rhythm, keeping this on track, are things such as food, exercise, temperature fluctuations, social interactions. So if these are happening if they are happening regularly, consistently, at the same time every day, this will help contribute to building a strong circadian rhythm for your child and helping with sleep. So for example, let's say you have an early riser. What are you doing when your child rises early in the morning? I'm going to guess that if you have an early riser, and let's say that your early riser is waking like super early, maybe 4:30, 5 a.m., I'm going to guess it didn't start happening right at that time. I would guess that your child was maybe sleeping in until 6:30 a.m. and then one day woke up around 6 a.m. So you went to your child. And then a couple days later, your child woke up at 5:50 a.m. and then 5:45 and then 5:30. But every time you went into your child. So what's happening is if you are going in and treating your child as if it's time to wake up, that social interaction is going to cause them to start waking earlier and have an earlier reset time for their circadian rhythm. So if you want to get out of that, you've got to let your child realize that it is time to still be sleeping until a reasonable hour. Same with short naps. If you've got a child who's sleeping and has short naps, if you go into the room the moment they wake up, they're going to think it's time to be awake, and it makes it much harder for them to fall back asleep and get into this cycle of an overtired child. So the main message that I want you guys to take away here, the main couple tips, is that one, resetting your child's clock with a consistent wake time every morning will help reset that 24-hour biological clock. It will help strengthen that. It will help with the duration of sleep. It will help with decreasing the frequency that your child wakes up. Second, keep your child on a regular schedule. When children are experiencing sleep issues, it is usually a couple things. One, they have an irregular schedule. So they are not sleeping at the same time every day, and they are not going to bed at the same time, waking at the same time. 2, maybe they have a regular schedule, but the regular schedule there's something that's thrown off. They're not sleeping at the right time of day. They're not maybe eating at the right time of day. Something else is not happening regularly enough for them to pick up and keep the circadian rhythm strong. And number 3, if you are struggling with your child's sleep, use light and darkness to your advantage. Light in the morning when it's time to wake up, darkness when it is time to sleep. I hope that you guys found this helpful. Do I have any questions from anyone about what I just talked about regarding the circadian rhythm? Any questions? While I'm waiting for questions to pop in, I will, let's talk about, so I just talked about the circadian rhythm, and this was one of 2 regulatory systems that affect sleep naturally. The second one is the sleep drive. So is sleep pressure. We are going to talk about that next week. And when we talk about sleep pressure and we talk about circadian rhythm, when we put those 2 together, you are going to understand even more why having a schedule for your child is so important. And you're going to understand why moments where maybe you're out running errands and your child falls asleep in the car, why does it make having the next nap more difficult? Why does it affect bedtime? Okay, well, I hope that you guys enjoyed this and that you join me next week. I go live every Tuesday at 1 p.m. And if you are curious, you want to see what working with me looks like, maybe you want to be proactive, or maybe you are struggling, maybe you have an early riser or a short napper, or you're having bedtime struggles, you can download my document at afterthestorksleep.com/what is entailed. I go over my step-by-step process of what working with me looks like. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out, book a phone call, whatever the case may be. Again, that website is afterthestorksleep.com/what is entailed. I hope that you guys are making it through. I know that it's the 5th week of quarantining and it can be difficult. Help your children and yourself by keeping a structure. Keep them on that schedule. Having that structure will help your child make it through these times. Hope you guys have a wonderful week. See you next week.